like to welcome you all tonight and thank you so much for joining us. I know we all have busy schedules, but the topic at hand is near and dear to all of us here. So as many of you know or may not know, Recycle Utah has been a cornerstone of our community since 1991, empowering people to live sustainable lives. And as you may have noticed, our community is evolving rapidly. We continue to welcome both visitors and new residents to our beloved mountain town. And with that growth, the pressure to uphold our commitment to sustainability increases every single day. As we navigate this new, or maybe not so new, reality of growth and change, it's more important than ever to look ahead and explore how Recycle Utah can continue to serve this community in a meaningful way. I'm now realizing that I didn't introduce myself, so maybe I'll take an opportunity to do that. I am Helena Sedaris, and I'm the vice chair on the board of Recycle Utah, a great community organization that we're so lucky to have. So tonight's presentation is a culmination of a process that began in early 2023 when Recycle Utah joined a series of meetings led by an ambitious county councilor. And these meetings included key participants from the city and the county, including both staff members and elected officials. Over the course of about 6 months, the primary focus of these meetings was on waste management within our growing community. One of the major takeaways is that Recycle Utah should take the lead in diverting more material from the county landfill. This led us to think differently and more broadly about our role. Up until this point, our strategic conversations centered around moving to a larger site where we could expand our existing services and more or less do the same thing. However, for various reasons, that move did not materialize. And while it was frustrating at times, this setback ended up being an actual blessing in disguise for us. It drove us to pursue fresh ideas and more innovative solutions. Had we simply moved to a larger site, we would probably still be here tonight having this very exact same conversation. We realized that the challenges of our community are bigger and much more complex than we had initially thought. So tonight you'll hear about these challenges and, more importantly, our proposed solutions. So in a world that we live in, who doesn't like solutions? So first, tonight you will hear from Tim Loveday, Summit County Solid Waste Superintendent. He will provide an overview of the waste management challenges we're facing as a community. Then Jim Bedell with Recycle Utah will explain what we've done over the past year to address these issues. Following that, Jim will introduce our consultants from RRS, who will share the research they've conducted and present their recommendations for how we can tackle these challenges together. Finally, we'll walk through our proposed action plan and most critically explain how you can help us bring it to life. So with that, I would love to introduce Carolyn Wawa, the Executive Director of Recycle Utah, to kick things off.
Thank you, Elena, and thank you everyone for coming tonight, and thank you for your commitment to Recycle Utah. It is my pleasure to introduce to you a friend of Recycle Utah. He is a public servant committed to responsible waste management. Tim Loveday runs a Summit County landfill, here to tell you about solid waste in our community. Welcome, Tim.
Well, this is a dangerous thing. I've got a clicker in my hand, so we'll see how this goes. Appreciate everyone coming out tonight. You know, this is a very important thing, and we're here to talk about Recycle Utah. But, you know, the truth of the matter is we're also here to talk about the Summit County landfill, because what Recycle Utah does is very impactful to our operations here in Summit County. So before we get into what Recycle Utah has to propose, let's talk a little bit about what our situation is here operationally in Summit County. All right, so here in Summit County, we have 2 landfills. We have the 3 Mile Canyon landfill. It's the one out by Rockport Reservoir. That's our municipal solid waste landfill. Your kitchen garbage, your wet garbage, that's what goes there. But then we also have the Hennifer C&D landfill. That's construction, demolition, debris, and that landfill is operated very differently than the municipal solid waste landfill is. But these things, you know, they're a finite amount of space. We only have so much time that we can stay in them. The 3 Mile Canyon landfill, if things go really well, at our current rate, plus about 2% increase a year, it will be full by 2053. After 2053, there's no more space, it closes, and we'll have to send our waste elsewhere. Now, the Hennifer landfill, it's a little bit different situation. You know, we're good to about 2057 there at our current load, but we bought additional property out there. We bought 420 some acres. We could expand that landfill if we had to. So our C&D is not the big challenge. It's that municipal waste that is a huge challenge for us. So we're a unique environment here in Summit County, very different than just about any other county other than Grand County. They're a little bit similar, but we have a lot of tourism here. You know, and we've gone from being a mining community and a ranching community to a situation now where tourism is our #1 driver. Well, tourism significantly affects the way we manage waste and the amount of waste we have here in the county. By EPA standards, we should be producing somewhere around 4.9 pounds per person per day, and that's what would be going into the landfill. At those numbers, Summit County would be doing 38,500 tons a year, roughly. You know, that's pretty easy to manage, and we can do that. But we're a tourism community, so we have all these people coming in and out. We have all these businesses and stuff. So we're actually averaging 7.62 pounds per person. Well, that's a lot for a local resident to be able to handle. That increases our load to 57,000 tons on average per year. That is a 48% increase in tonnage. That's a 48% increase in cost. So there's a lot more to deal with in Summit County than just your standard, you know, residential type load. So along with tourism comes the short-term rentals. Here in the basin, we're running about 70% of the residential housing is actually being rented out through Airbnb, VRBO, these type things. In fact, you know, the tax that comes in off those, the #1 payer of tax in Summit County is Airbnb. It's a pretty amazing thing to think about. But it also complicates things for our solid waste management and our recycle programs. These are short-term rentals. They're only a few days. Well, they have to clean them completely out. They want to be able to empty those garbage cans. That doesn't fit into the Summit County residential schedule. We collect garbage once a week, and we collect recycle every other week. So it creates, you know, a need for recycle to be able to go somewhere, because right now it's going in somebody's dumpster somewhere. It's being illegally dumped for the most part. They're not bringing it to my scale. It's going to the dumpster somewhere. So it's a pretty big deal that we need to be able to address. That increased waste volume is showing up at our scale through commercial trucks. So I'm not hurting necessarily at the landfill, but you know, the costs are driven extensively in our budget each year. Fiscal impacts are big. We're looking at a 48% increase. That's why the county was looking at using the rural hospital tax to be able to divert some of that to the landfill to offset some of those costs. That passed, and we'll start seeing some of those effects this coming year. But you know, again, it's just a lot more waste than what a small county would normally have to do. Improper disposal is always a problem with these short-term rentals. And then, you know, the complications with the recycle program are extensive, because everybody comes from a different part of the country. They all recycle differently. Our communication's not there and effective to keep that waste put into the right container at the right place. We're a commingled area. We generally, on our curbside program, we do not collect glass, but yeah, we get a lot of glass in there. So we have a lot of contamination problems, and that's a big deal as we move forward, trying to be able to keep that stuff separated. So we're looking at trying to navigate a sustainable future. We're reaching out to partners, Park City Foundation, Recycle Utah, anybody that will help us divert from the landfill, because at the end of the day, you can call it recycle, you know, reuse, whatever you want to do. But for me, at my scale, it's about diversion. I need it diverted away from the landfill. Reuse is great. Recycle is great. We need these things to not cross our scale. Once it crosses our scale at the landfill, there's really nothing I can do. We're going to put it in a hole, and we're going to bury it. And that just simply is not a good way to work things long term. We've done what we can engineering wise to expand our life of the landfill. We've almost Well, we tripled the life of the Hennifer landfill just in its existing space by engineering measures. With 3 Mile, we have no place to go. So when it's full, it's full. So that's a finite resource that we need to be able to deal with. So that's where we are. We're really at the beginning. It's up to you guys on where we ultimately can go to divert. Like I say, once it crosses my scale, I can't control it. But out here, we can control it. And Recycle Utah plays a key piece in being able to do that. Their diversion right now is basically equal to our curbside residential program. So that's already an extensive amount of material that's not making it to the landfill. Now, it's important that we keep that up. It's important that we increase that because we're in a situation where we are going to fill up, or if operations we can't continue and we don't make it to 2053, and we had to build a transfer station, that would cost us about $3 million to do. Then we would have to ship that out to another landfill. The current rate to ship garbage out of Summit County to another landfill that's commercial is about $175 a ton. Now that doesn't necessarily impact the residential program extensively because it's already costed about $142 a ton to do residential curbside. But all the commercial entities, which is more than half of the waste going in the 3 Mile Canyon landfill, that's crossing the scale now at $40 a ton, would be looking at anywhere from $175 to $200 a ton to be able to do that. That's a big impact on our community. All the more reason we need to divert, and all the more reason that Recycle Utah needs to be successful as a partner in making that happen. Thank you.
Hi, good evening, everybody. My name is Jim Bedell. I'm now an employee, a former board member of Recycle Utah. And first of all, I want to echo Helena's thanks for all of you for being here tonight. It's great to see such a good turnout for what we think is a very, very important evening. And if you think Tim is dangerous with a clicker, you're going to see what I can do in just a moment. I'd like to pick up a little bit on where Tim left off about the landfill challenges, because they are very, very real. Sometimes they're difficult to understand, and I don't know how you guys feel sitting in the audience, but I've spent enough time with Tim and his colleagues to understand a lot of the technical things that they deal with to try and make those landfills efficient and effective. And I think Tim said this pretty clearly, but the best thing we can all do is keep material out of there. And that's the primary focus of what you're going to hear from us tonight. So during the discussions that Helena mentioned between ourselves, the city, and the county, Recycle Utah also began to speak with similar community stars throughout the Mountain West in order to learn a little bit about how they address similar issues or whether they face similar issues. And we learned a lot of interesting things from those discussions. First thing we learned is that other communities are very aware of the good work that we do here in Summit County. They're particularly admiring of the education and outreach that we do here in the community, and appreciate the impacts how that impacts the amount of product we're able to process at Recycle Utah. What they also appreciate, and before I get to this, can I just ask for a show of hands? How many of you actually come to our facility and bring material to us? That's what I thought. So basically everybody. So throughout the Mountain West, people know what you do. It's kind of a small community. We all visit. When Troy or Carolyn or I, go up north, we stop in at Teton County and check out the landfill. And they do the same thing here. And one of the things we heard from all these guys is just how much they admire what you guys do, which is the time you take to sort materials and bring them to us, because that doesn't happen in many other places. And that's a great strength of our organization. So thank you guys for doing that. Another thing we learned that's not quite as flattering is that despite your good work, despite our community's good intentions, we are far behind on important metrics of landfill diversion and ultimately recycling. And I want to prove that to you. Oh, thank you. Did I do that or did you do that? You did it. Okay, thank you. Told you this could be a problem. I want to demonstrate that to you by discussing something that's modestly technical. When people talk about how effective they are at preserving landfills and keeping material out, they refer to a diversion rate. And the diversion rate is basically the ratio of how much of your total waste in your house, your business, or your community you divert from the landfill. So let me illustrate that with a simple example here. Let's take a typical household that generates 10 pounds, 20 pounds of waste per week. And being a good Park City household, you're involved in recycling. So you take 5 pounds to the recycle center or put it in your curbside bin. You're also involved in food waste and yard waste composting. So you take 4 pounds, put it in the compost bin. And you appreciate the value of our reuse warehouse, the Christian Center, Habitat for Humanity's Restore. So you have about 1 pound of material a week that you give to other operations where they can be reused. And the remaining 10 pounds ends up in the landfill. So in this sample, you create 20 pounds of waste each week. 10 of it gets diverted by not going to the landfill. So we would say that your diversion rate here is 50%. Half of your material gets diverted from the landfill. So if you can follow the simple math on that, higher diversion rate is good. So now we cut to the chase, and maybe Chelsea's got it for me. Okay, so the diversion rate in the United States, according to the EPA, is 32%, which is not bad. Roughly 1 out of 3 pounds of waste ends up being diverted responsibly. As we've talked about and met with some other mountain town communities, my heroes are Boulder. They're one of the earlier programs in recycling. Still a very, very strong operation in Boulder. The city of Boulder's diversion rate's 52%. Very impressive. The county, I'm not getting there, Chelsea. There we go. County of Boulder, by the way, is at 35, a little bit lower. Teton County, Wyoming, which is Jackson Hole area, 35. Blaine County, Idaho, which is the Sun Valley area, 34. City of Aspen, 40. Vail, 31. Right? So all of these peers of ours are sort of at or above the national average. I'm not going to ask you to try and guess where we are, but you can probably guess it's not good. The Summit County diversion number, and every time I look at this, I call Tim up and make sure we're looking at this correctly, because given our community's successful focus on sustainable living in so many different areas, it's really mind-boggling that we're at 12%. But that's where we are. And the realization and the scariness of this number is what led us to reach out for some professional advice as to how we can make this a better number. And I'm going to introduce shortly our consultants from RRS who are going to tell you how we are at this level and what we can do to improve our diversion rate. But before I do that, I just want to give brief thanks to 2 organizations without whom we would not be here tonight, because we would not have been able to retain RRS. The Park City Community Foundation, through its Climate Fund, we approached them early with this idea. They were enthusiastic supporters and contributed funds to it. And most importantly, the Park City Chamber Bureau, who were also enthusiastic supporters and provided half of the funding for the study. So thank you very much to those organizations. So now I'd like to turn this over to the real stars of the evening from RRS. Stephen Clayman, who, I don't know if anybody actually call you Stephen Clayman. SK is, as he's more widely known, and Kristen Wieland, who are going to take you through the bulk of the presentation tonight. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Thanks, Jim. Thanks, Helena. And thank you all for showing up tonight. We're happy to talk to you about the work that SK and I have been doing, as well as a couple of our other colleagues with RRS have gotten to know Recycle Utah as well as the community a bit, and then also visiting a couple of the peer communities that Jim just spoke about, to really feel like we understood what your community is, what your goals are, and how we can bring our expertise to you to support the initiatives that you want to move ahead to change that 12 number to something much higher. And my name's Kristen Wieland. I'm a senior consultant with RRS. Just a little bit about our company. RRS stands for Resource Recycling Systems. We've been around for about 35 years. We're about 75 people, but I wouldn't call us a traditional consultancy. We're mission driven and we're employee owned. Most of the people who work for our company, and there's about 75 of us at this point, have come from the industry. We've not just sat behind a desk and done research. We've actually been in the field and operated facilities similar to what Recycle Utah has. Some bigger, some smaller. We've been in landfill operations. We've sort of been in the industry, boots on the ground, in the trenches, if you will. So we're happy to bring that experience, that expertise to you, to be able to share with you some of the things that we've seen from the industry, to be able to support the goals that you have. Our company's not just operationally focused, though SK and I did come, both of us came from that background. I came from a public sector that had a lot of different infrastructure in the solid waste industry, including landfill, material recovery facility, household hazardous waste, programs like that. And SK, I'm sure we'll talk about his background, but he came from the public sector. So I think the combination of our two perspectives, it will lend itself well to supporting you in the growth of Recycle Utah, whatever that looks like. We do have some recommendations for you based on what we learned about your community. But I think the more engagement there is and the more conversations there are about this, we'll identify even some additional opportunities that you'll want to think about. There will be more people that come to the table that will find out about this and want to be part of it. So that's really exciting. When we first came here to Park City, it was I think late summer. We met with Jim and Troy and Carolyn and the team at Recycle Utah and really wanted to get to understand what the operation is, what it's been, what some of the groundwork has been that you've built within the community, and how the culture of the organization works. And what we found is that the culture is really the heart of the organization. It's not just a recycling center. It's a place for the community to come and gather and for friends to meet. And so that's a really important component of what you want that to continue to be. So we looked at different, there were three main tasks that we worked on. We had some interviews with county, with city folks. We went out to the landfill and met with Tim. And we talked extensively with the folks at Recycle Utah. For those that we didn't get to talk to while we were here, we did phone interviews with the city and with the council member and really wanted to make sure that we were getting different perspectives. We visited a couple of processing facilities down in Salt Lake City to understand how those might impact what the recommendation is that we put forth to Recycle Utah. And then we went back home and we did some more research just to make sure that we really understood. The second step was site visits. Because we know that you all compare yourself to other mountain communities, we thought that would, and Jim actually thought that would be an important component for us to really go out and see, put our feet on the ground where they're doing their operations and see what they're doing that's working, and also see what's not working, so that that's not part of what we would recommend to Recycle Utah. We also, for those that we didn't get to meet, we ushered a couple of interviews. Actually, Jim and Troy and Carolyn met with the folks in Boulder. SK already knew those folks, but then we also introduced them to folks at Recycle Ann Arbor, which have a very similar model. It's a nonprofit, but they really grew themselves into a really substantial organization, but maintained the culture. And we knew that was going to be something that was really important. And then finally, once we knew what we felt what was going to be the recommendation for a new operating model, we really wanted to get our hands around and get our arms around what the capital and operating expenses would be of an ambitious goal like that, to really grow the facility, grow the footprint of it, and grow the impact of it. So that's what we're going to talk to you about today. I'll speak for a few minutes, and then SK will talk a little bit more about the operations. So I'll talk mostly about the findings from the work that we did. So there's 6 main findings. I won't read these because we're going to go into each of them in a little bit more detail. But they really, the findings support, generally significantly support the work that Recycle Utah is doing, and really showcase that there is a real legitimate reason to grow the organization, because there is so much community support. In those interviews that we did, there was a lot of positivity. No one, at least to our faces said that that's a terrible idea. They shouldn't do that. There was a lot of support and a lot of, yeah, I want to be part of that. And that was just generally across the board. So it was a really positive process. And I think that the outcome will be something that you can grow from and really fine tune to make sure that it's what you need for the future. So the first one is community goals. We wanted to make sure first and foremost that the goals of Recycle Utah, and the mission statement is over there underneath community goals. The mission statement for Recycle Utah, we wanted to make sure that what their mission is, what they saw themselves as being in the community, is consistent with what the community needed. You can see the statistics there. What we found is that they overwhelmingly are consistent. Everyone is pointing themselves in the same direction. They're on the same paths. And what we need to do right now is make sure that there's a reason for those paths to cross over into each other. In 2018, Summit County has set a goal to reduce waste going to landfill by 30%. Park City set a 2030 zero waste goal. The Community Foundation has a zero food waste goal. You've got the Winter Olympics coming, and there are going to be some sustainability initiatives that are just tied in to the Olympics. And so you've got a little time, not a lot of time, but a little bit of time to prepare for that and figure out how Recycle Utah can become an integral part of the Olympic experience. Park City Mountain and Deer Valley Resort both have sustainability initiatives that include waste reduction. And then finally, the Main Street Business District, it has its own initiative going on with Park City to identify how they can organize waste collection a little more efficiently and make sure that there's room for recycling in that. So overwhelmingly, what's going on at each individual component of the city, at all of these different intersection points, everyone is kind of singing from the same songbook. It's just a matter of getting everyone kind of singing in the same tune. So that was a really positive thing to have as an outcome. The second one, though, is when it comes to investment, the finding is that community waste reduction goals cannot be met without increased investment in infrastructure and programming. And despite the fact that that list of community goals and community organizations are all pointing in the same direction for waste reduction, there really has been no investment in any infrastructure or programming to get those goals achieved. So it's a huge gap. But it's one that I think we're starting to talk about tonight and identify whose responsibilities those are and who can step up to the plate. And traditionally in organizations like this and in communities like this, it's not one organization that steps up to the plate, but a bunch of them or a bunch of entities. So I think this is the time to start talking about who wants to step up to the plate and begin to change that so that there is some infrastructure investment to meet the current needs, but as well as the ongoing growing needs of the community. We identified a lot of partnership opportunities. Jim was able to introduce us to some of the potential partners, that they're current partners, but also partners that you would want to grow with. Looking at the top bullet there, the recycling collection service providers, there's a list of 8, I think, collection service providers. They're not all collecting the same thing. They're not all doing it in the same way. They're not all collecting the same materials, but they're all collecting material that ultimately gets diverted from the landfill. And so those would be the primary partners that you would want to look to contribute to a larger organization, a larger facility for Recycle Utah. We talked to most of the companies on that list. And again, they were all very interested in hearing more about what Recycle Utah's path would be and wanted to be part of it. I think there's at least a couple of them here tonight. So it's exciting to see that there's such momentum being on the list towards collecting more material, diverting more material from the waste stream in Summit County. Second, there's increasing attention with regard to food waste, and I would say that this is not isolated to Summit County. Food waste has really become a high-profile material that there are endless reasons to keep food waste and other organic material out of landfills. Not only does it fill up landfills, it generates methane, and it's a greenhouse gas contributor. So there are a lot of reasons to reduce food waste, not only the generation of food waste, but how food waste gets disposed of. If it's composted, if it's collected and then composted or digested in a little bit more high-tech fashion, there are outputs from that can actually benefit the community through soil products or a gas. So there are much better places that food and other organic material can go than landfill. And food actually takes up a significant amount of the total amount that goes to landfill, shockingly so. So there's a lot of reasons to divert food waste from landfill. And then we identified that meeting the community goals is going to require partnerships. This, again, is not a responsibility of just Recycle Utah. It's not just the responsibility of Summit County. But there's going to have to be partnerships that come together to identify responsibilities and roles within a new recycling sphere for Summit County. So those partnerships are going to ensure that the capacity can be met. So if more material gets recycled or otherwise diverted from landfill, there needs to be places for that material to go. And it's not necessarily going to be right to a manufacturer. There are typically going to be intermediate processing facilities, including something like Recycle Utah. Meeting the community goals means that costs need to be controlled. While everyone in this room, I'm sure, can agree that recycling is a good thing, if it's too expensive, it becomes a pain point for us in our household budget. So we need to make sure that the costs are controlled in whatever the new solution is. We want to make sure that the value can be maintained. And we don't want to degrade the material. So when you recycle, we want to keep it at its highest and best use. But we also want to keep the value of that material as close to your community as we can. So locating a processing facility that's a little bit more robust than what Recycle Utah has right now will allow that material and the value of that material to stay here in Summit County instead of going down to Salt Lake City, which is where most of it goes. And then you'll keep the value of that here in your community. And we want to make sure that there's reliability for the residents. So we want to make sure that all of you who use the Recycle Utah facility, and as well as curbside recycling, we want to make sure that there's always a place for you to recycle, and make sure that there's always capacity for that, and that it's always there for you to use. And those are all going to require partnerships. Having flexible operations is something that any recycling facility needs to embed in their facility. Recycling facilities are never the same from day to day. You always have new material coming in. Sometimes it's more material, sometimes it's less. So there's inherent flexibility that has to be built into recycling facilities. So we want to make sure that Recycle Utah, in whatever the future looks like, that they're not only managing or building for the capacity that we know about right now, but the capacity that will come as new people move in, as the Olympics come and you have a big spike in the waste generation in the region. So we want to make sure that there's scalable operations that will allow that inherent flexibility that all recycling facilities need to have. So we know that there's a potential increase in tonnage. We know that food waste is an emerging material that will need some kind of collection process and some kind of processing capacity. We know that there's some basic equipment like a baler. So think about a baler on a farm that squishes the hay together or the straw. Well, this is a baler that actually squishes the recyclables together, and it's a critical component of recycling facilities. Forklifts, small front end loaders, a building to put all of this in. None of it can happen, most of it cannot happen in open air. It needs to be inside of a building to control dust and noise. And so we're estimating between 20 and 30,000 square feet for the basic building needs. And then access to transportation is really an important component of a recycling facility. If the trucks are coming in to pick up the loads of recyclables, they need to be able to get to the facility. At the facility that Recycle Utah is at right now, those trucks have a very difficult time getting into the very tight space, as well as all of you. We've been there a couple of times now, and there's always a lineup of people. So there needs to be an easy flow of traffic, both for the users of the center, but as well as for the vendors, the companies that are coming in to pick up the materials. So we identified a hub and spoke collection model that SK is going to talk a little bit more about, but I'll just give an overview of what a hub and spoke collection model is. So if you think about the graphic there, it's a bicycle tire. There's the rim, and there's the hub, and then there's all those little spokes. And the spokes are kind of brittle, actually, individually, but collectively, the spokes actually make for a really strong tire, really strong wheel of the bike. So a recycling program can act very similarly to the wheel on a bicycle, whereas there's a central processing facility where all the recyclables come to. It's an aggregation point, if you will. So that what we have presented here and proposed is that Recycle Utah is really well positioned to be the hub in a hub and spoke system. So they would be the aggregation point for recyclables from the entire region, potentially eliminating the need to haul recyclables down to Salt Lake City. The spokes in that system can be varied. They can be municipal recycling operations from outside of the Park City area and even outside of the Summit County area. They can be private recycling haulers that have single stream recyclables or source separated, where it's just cardboard or it's just a single material. And they could be individuals like you that are currently using the Recycle Utah model, whether it's at one of the glass drop-off points or actually going to Recycle Utah to the facility. All of those can be spokes in this hub and spoke model. And then businesses are underserved right now, I would say, and that's not an uncommon thing in recycling programs for businesses to be underserved. But a hub and spoke model would also include businesses, allowing them to bring material in and contribute to the landfill reduction goals. The hub and spoke collection model is really a good model for Summit County, for Recycle Utah, to be the hub of, and then include and pull in as many of the spoke organizations as possible. SK is going to talk a little bit more about how the hub function would work and what we've proposed to Recycle Utah as an ideal situation that would allow them to manage not only the material generated now, but also that comes in the future.
Now, the great people at Recycle Utah have an awesome facility. It's extremely small. The first time I met Carolyn was a few years ago. I was working for a company called Closed Loop Partners. We were talking about different opportunities back then. I was on my way up to Evanston, Wyoming, and I said, geez, I ought to see what's going on here in Park City. So 2-3 years ago, I met Carolyn. And my eyes were open, like, geez, if you ever get into a path forward, we should talk. This is what I've done. This is what we can do. And then had the great opportunity to meet Jim Bedell. So, and then from there, we started focusing on, all right, you have issues here. We've got to get you off a 12% diversion and get you out of a linear model and into a circular economy model. So what we then looked into was, all right, there's got to be a couple approach plans here. One is, plan A would be capital. We looked at, before I get into the different A and B models, what we looked at for both models was, all right, what are the needs? One is land, building, equipment, the revenues. How are you going to produce revenues to offset the cost of the operation and just the capital cost of the infrastructure? So you're looking at tipping fees for commercial haulers, service fees, user fees for residents that utilize the facility. Currently, Recycle Utah does a great job of that now by the donations that they get and sponsorships. Sale of commodities, you would see an uptick in some of the sales of commodities by having an influx of volumes coming in. But regardless of the models A and B that I'm going to show you just a high-level snapshot of what we've been talking about and what we're recommending, the local recycling operation has outgrown the location, folks. I mean, I think a majority of the hands raised here utilize the facility or have been at it. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, it's a half an acre or less. 3/10 of an acre, I'm sorry, I stand corrected, and that's a great correction. It's just mind-boggling that I almost fell over, like, just in awe, like, I thought it was pretty good at operations. I was stuck with it for 30 years, but you guys are shoving 400 cars a day through this facility. And I'm like, no way. But that's what's happening. And my hat's off to you. Recycle Utah must move. It's a point in time politically or motivationally that they have to move. I don't think they're going to be able to stay there. And what they need to do to climb off of 12% diversion to help the county, the cities, and all the municipalities in Summit County, it's not going to happen on that footprint of 0.3 of an acre. It just doesn't work. So operating model A was based on a 20,000 square foot building that you would roughly have. Now this is if you had to do something preliminary. This isn't the major. Option B is really what needs to be done, so you have local infrastructure. But if you needed to get off to an initial start, you'd need a building at least 20 to 30,000 square feet. So if you build a building that's 20,000 square feet, just what we call a dump and bale facility, basically what you have now is where you can drop off material, put it on the tip floor, and then each of the materials that are dropped off, you bale that and then ship it off to a mill where it's remade into new products. This would give them more access, more room for other volumes in the county to come in. Right now, it would be something where you'd have to put it on 5 to 6 acres. So there's a shortage right now that they don't have the land, but we already have found something, and I think Jim's going to talk about that later. So you need the infrastructure of 5 to 6 acres. You need 20,000 square feet that's expandable. Because with option B, to put in if you ever hear the term MRF, it really means it's MRF, and it means Material Recovery Facility. So that is what we're proposing is local processing infrastructure. To have just Model A, where it's just a building where you can operate and they can have more ease of movement and capitalize on more material influx of the source separated materials, which would also provide commercial access and municipal access. Remember that from this meeting forward. Right now, if you are here and you own a commercial business, you are challenged to bring anything into that site. Matter of fact, you can't. So if you have your hauler picking up, which you saw that list earlier, they can't drop off there. They don't drop off there. There's nowhere to put it. So what does that happen? What does that create? That creates a gap where, hey, I own SK Appliance and I have all these cardboard boxes. I can only fit, I'm on Main Street, I can only fit this size container in my back alley. And all of you here have driven in these back alleys and you see these small 2-yard front load dumpsters or 6 yards or 4 yards. And perhaps the hauler might only be able to service those 1, 2, or 3 times a week when really I need 4 or 5 times a week or a bigger container, but I just don't have the room to do that. That is creating that's creating a 12% diversion, because now as a business owner, I'm sitting there saying, I need more access, I need more room. So if you have local processing infrastructure, now there can be shorter distance runs rather than sending stuff all the way down into the valley, which is, by truck, it's anywhere from, 40 to 60 minutes each way. So just think of the greenhouse gas initiatives that you're creating or you're cutting by having local processing infrastructure here for all your commercial, municipal, and residential volumes and materials. Part of Model A was, it is a lower operating cost, but the only thing you're doing there is baling material and accepting residential materials. So the current program where you go in there and drive onto the street, pull into a parking spot, bring out your materials out of your vehicles, and then put them into the different containers or bins that they have set up, we would create a model where this building, one side of the building would be for the drop-off materials. The other side of the building would be for commercial vehicles and municipal vehicles. And that would create a safe haven for your vehicles, and it'd be a lot larger so that you weren't integrated in with commercial trucks and municipal vehicles. This type of infrastructure, you're looking at anywhere between $15 and $20 million. Here is the type of materials that you may have seen down at the Recycle Utah facility now, but what you would see is a building such as this, where the red dot is up here. This is a large baler with an infeed. You just don't see that currently now on 3/10 of an acre. And it's desperately needed. It's desperately needed for the municipal volumes, and it's desperately needed for the commercial volumes that don't have access to Recycle Utah locally. So other materials here that would help, and this is part of the tie-in where Kristen talked about the hub and spoke model. So to create additional volumes, to create additional revenues through the sales of commodities and elevating your diversion and diverting and mitigating the cost that is on the path of destruction here by going from a $40 tip fee, $50 tip fee for landfill, going up to $170 to $180. That's what Tim knows right now. But in 10 years, what is that trucking cost going to be and that landfill cost by trucking it out of this area? It's going to be a lot higher with inflation. So you could see models out there. We talked about food scrap recycling or food waste recycling. There would also be containment or a bunker or some sort of receptacle where you could drop off materials if you don't have curbside collection for food waste. So we would also implement something, or we're proposing that Recycle Utah would have some sort of component where commercial business or residents can bring in food waste. So you'd have something along the line of this container, or slightly bigger. It could be a roll-off and hauled down by one of the local haulers or somebody that's currently doing residential collection now. Okay, so the hub and spoke model, you'd see roll-off containers at different parts of, in different municipalities throughout the county, where some of the residents are saying, and unfortunately this is society. I've learned this throughout many years of doing this, and I'm not saying it's anyone in this room, but there are folks out there that may live 20 minutes away from here, 30 minutes away from here, that are still within the county, and it's just like, all right, look, I'm not going to drive 20 minutes to drop off my recycling, so I'm just going to put it in my trash bin. But if we create more access with drop-offs, hub and spoke models, so this is the spoke, and then this stuff, as it would get filled, would get hauled into a larger facility that would be run and owned and operated by Recycle Utah and potentially other partners. These are just examples of other drop-off components, how it may look like. So this is the spoke model, and this is more of a visual view for you to understand. If we jump to, so operating model B is is what we were proposing that Jim and Carolyn really focus on, and the team from Recycle Utah is a processing facility. It's still a material recovery facility, a MRF. This, you're going to process the material. You're going to be able to bring the city of Park City material that is currently collected curbside in the carts, the 96-gallon carts that you put out in front of your household. And that material, rather than it being driven down to Salt Lake City, it would stay here locally and be processed. So you would need that facility to be roughly 30,000 square feet. You'd need 5 to 6 acres. Again, this facility would be bifurcated for the community, where residents that want to continue to use a drop-off, they would drop their materials off on one half of the building. Commercial vehicles stay on the other. In the middle, you are then processing material. You are taking the single stream material that is at your curbside collection component, and they would process that through a machine. And I'll do a high-level snapshot of that here in a few minutes. So that is conveyors, optical sorters, robotics, and other potential components, so that it'd be a best-in-class, world-class facility, which Recycle Utah, at the level they're at, are world-class in what they do, especially on 3/10 of an acre with 400 cars a day. So you, as a community, Summit County, and all the municipalities within it deserve world-class infrastructure to make this happen. Part of the single stream process is a building such as this. This would be roughly 30,000 square feet. This is not the facility that we're proposing. Hey, this is exactly what you have to put in. All right, we're not at that level. This is just an isometric drawing of what a single stream, fully automated facility looks like. This, you have a tip floor here where your recyclables get dropped off. On this side of the building, perhaps you have the drop off, so you're away from the trucks. But the commercial vehicles dump here and here, and your volume is then brought into the facility and run through different conveyors and optical sorts. That is just camera technology, AI vision technology, where materials are going across the belt and an air jet is shooting it off the belt into its correct bunker. What you'll see here is then stuff is baled, and these small cubes right here you see would then be put on these tractor trailers and sent off to a mill. By having a facility like this localized, you are now creating a facility that is a lot closer than 60 minutes each way going up and down a hill. And it could be, again, I don't know the exact minutes, but by truck, it's anywhere from 40 to 60 minutes each way. Now you have local processing infrastructure fully integrated for this community and for surrounding communities. Those are the components that we looked at, and the best modeling for it. Volume is king. Volume helps produce the sale of commodities that we talked about. It helps produce materials that'll get shipped out and processed in this facility. It'll also help alleviate or mitigate the issues that Tim talked about with the landfills. We have too much, it's not just garbage going in there. There's an enormous amount of recyclables going into the landfill that needs to get diverted out. Without local infrastructure, it is a challenge to get off of that 12% diversion. And some folks might sit there and say, well, okay, we already have infrastructure down in Salt Lake City. Well, it's not working now, you're at 12%. And a lot of that is because you logistically have to ship it a further distance. Now, if you have it within the county, doors will open.
All right, hello again, everybody. Listen, I know we went through a lot of kind of detailed technical analysis about recycling here tonight, and that might have been a little bit more perhaps than some of you wanted, but we thought it was important because I'm about to tell you what we intend to do, and I think it's critical that you understand we didn't just come up with this plan in a vacuum, but we relied on expert advice and have come up with a plan based on best practices throughout the region. So thank you, Kristen and SK, for all the work you did for us. And thank you all for listening. So tonight we've told you about a problem, and RRS and SK at the very end have told you about their recommendations. I want to finish our presentation by telling you precisely what we want to do about it. So here's what Recycle wants to do, Recycle Utah intends to do. First of all, we want to build a hub and spoke system. We're going to build it large with the capacity to handle future growth in the area. So we're going to go with Model B. We're going to establish remote collection sites throughout Summit County as part of the hub and spoke. And the total price tag for the big plan we have is $25 million. So we're not thinking about Model A or any half-hearted solutions. We're not a 12% organization. You know, this is very, very disturbing for us. 12% diversion is against everything Recycle Utah stands for, everything we teach, and everything we believe in. And I hope you guys feel the same way. So this is not time to continue to muddle through. This is time to act. So that's what we want to build. What does it look like? Here's a schematic from several years ago when we weren't thinking particularly big about what that hub could look like. SK showed you a few different photos earlier. This is one that's a little bit more customized for us. you show me the next, yeah. The front side of it, the residential side, will have the type of drop-off capacity that SK just recommended to us. We will also have enhanced space within the structure for education, events like our Green Drinks program, and outreach, because we're going to need more and more of that to get the diversion rate up. So we'll incorporate that into the space as well. We'll also have a slightly larger reuse warehouse there as well. The most important part of what we need to build would go here, if I can figure out the pointer, on the backside. And I'm not going to dwell further on that. SK did a great job of just describing what the inside of a large processing facility looks like. That's what we're going to build there. Next question is, where do we put it? Well, the good news is, based on extensive discussions over many years with Park City municipal government and Summit County, we know where it goes. The county owns land out near Home Depot at a place called the Gilmore site, which is, just to orient you here on the map, Home Depot is kind of here. This is Route 40, there's Route 80. That's the location. That's where the hub belongs. There's enough space there to accommodate 30,000 square feet and 5 acres. It's in an industrial area, light industrial area, which is perfectly appropriate for our activity. It's very convenient to the roads, as SK and Christian pointed out, and it's pretty centrally located within the county. So that's where the hub goes. What about the spokes? Well, orient you again here. Here's our hub. This is not the time to decide exactly where we put those remote collection facilities and precisely what they look like. You've seen some schematics about that earlier. But just to be clear, Park City proper, our ancestral home and the source of a lot of material in the county, will need a decent-sized remote collection facility here. Somewhere down in the Snyderville Basin, Kimball, out to Jeremy Ranch, where we currently have a glass bin, we'll need one there. Most importantly, for our community, we need to serve the other parts of the county. We actually held, just to prove how valuable remote collection facilities can be to some of these remote areas, we held a collection event this past weekend out in Colville. And over the course of 4 hours on a snowy, cold day, we collected over 1,000 pounds of material from Colville residents. And people could not have been more effusive in thanking us for showing up and giving them the chance to deposit material with us rather than keep it in their basement for another 10 years or put it in the landfill. So we know we need to do this, and we need to set up these facilities to serve the whole community. So how are we going to pay for it? You know, $25 million is not a small amount of money, but I'd suggest to you that in the context of funding we have previously dedicated to very important sustainability initiatives here, open space, transportation initiatives recently, we can afford $25 million. Now, unfortunately, Recycle Utah can't afford $25 million. Our preferred method of operating going forward is that our local governments, which means Park City and the county, with perhaps the participation of the smaller governments, build that facility. So they provide the land, they provide the buildings along the lines of what we've described earlier. We are more than willing to contribute some of our savings that we've accumulated over the years and invest in a capital campaign to try and build the best inside of that facility as possible. I'm particularly excited about optical sorting systems. We started looking at them a year or so ago, and just during the past year, they've come down in price extensively, and they're becoming more modular. So when we first asked about the possibilities of optical sorting, they said, yeah, if you're like the city of Boulder or Ann Arbor, sure, you can afford it. Now, the way that technology is evolving, we can afford it. And it'll probably be another year or so before this facility is built, and during that time, it may come down even more in price. But fundamentally, if we're going to do this, the city and the county government are going to have to pay for it, the large share of it, and that means you're going to have to pay for it. It's not my role here tonight to talk about precisely how the city and the county might want to finance that. They have very good finance departments and have extensive experience in figuring out ways to share the economic burden among citizens fairly. But let's just be clear about it. If this is going to happen, we're going to have to pay for it. And that's not going to be easy for our elected officials. They have lots of demands on their time. There are a lot of things we want to do in the community. What we need to do to get this done is build on the support we already have with local government. I mean, Tim's here tonight, as a senior member of the Summit County staff because he cares about what we do. I don't want to put words in other people's mouth, but I think the rest of the county staff certainly cares. Elected officials at the county and the city care. We've had lots of discussions with them over long periods of time, and as somebody said earlier, they do say nice things and very supportive things. But what we need to do is give them the impetus to make this a primary goal for this year. And that's where you guys come in. Chelsea? There we go. Okay. So one way you can help us out is by showing your support for what we've outlined for you tonight. There's a QR code up here that will lead you to a statement of support for everything we've presented to you here tonight. We'll also have, for those of you who don't like QR codes, copies of that statement out in the lobby for you to read and sign on the way out, and access to this will be available on our website going forward. So what we need to have happen is for you guys to show us that you support the plan. If you have friends who are not here tonight, who you know would be supportive of this, we'll make portions of this presentation available on the website so they can see what we've said, but let them know too. Because what we intend to do is gather enough support among the community to be able to go to our elected officials and say, the support is there, you guys know this needs to happen, we have a definitive plan, let's get it done. So as I think Tim said earlier at the end of his presentation, in many ways it is up to you. We can get this done, but we need your support. Thanks.